In this video, we're going to understand the logic of the search process before diving into our code. So basically, our user is trying to get from a location A to a location B. So the search process is going to look for all trips going from A to B, or to be accurate, is going to look for all locations or all trips going from near A to near B. So how do we find locations which are near a point A? So let's pick up New Orleans in the US, and we want to find all locations which are within a 10 miles radius from New Orleans. If you remember, when we stored our trips on a database, we referred to the location of our trips using the latitude and longitude. So we need to convert that 10 miles radius to a latitude and longitude language. So how are we going to do that? Well, first, let's just have a quick reminder of what these values are, just to be comfortable when we use them in the code. So the latitude is the angle between that line, which goes through the center of Earth and our location, and that line, which is the projection of that line on the equator. That's the latitude. In our case, it's 30 degrees. The longitude is the angle between the prime meridian, which goes through Greenwich in southeast London, and that meridian, which goes through our location. So that's the longitude. So if you start from this point, for example, and you travel east, you're going to have a longitude of +10, +20, and if you keep going until the opposite point of this one, then you're going to get to +180. If you travel west, then you're going to get -10, -20, and so on until you get to the opposite point of this, and you're going to get to -180. And the point having these two longitudes, -180 and +180, is going to be the same. Now the latitude, if you travel from this point here, that's a latitude of 0. If you travel up north, you're going to get 30 degrees there, and you're going to get 90 degrees at the North Pole. If you travel south, then you're going to go in the negative numbers until -90 at the South Pole. All right. So now we want to find locations which are 10 miles within a 10 miles radius from New Orleans. So how can we convert that to latitude, and how can we convert that to longitude? So let's start with the latitude. So we're converting 10 miles to latitude degrees. Okay, if you travel from the North Pole to the South Pole through that meridian, then the distance that you would travel is going to be 12,430 miles. And that corresponds to the whole range between -90 and +90. That's a range of 180 degrees. So for 10 miles, it's quite simple. The result is 10 multiplied by 180 divided by 12,430. And that's our latitude tolerance. Okay. So all points which are within a 10 miles radius, but if you travel up north or south, okay, are going to have a latitude of 30 degrees plus minus that tolerance. All right, now let's move to the longitude. It's going to be a little bit more complicated. Okay, so if you travel 10 miles to the west or 10 miles to the east, what would you get for the longitude degrees, or what is the range of the longitude degrees? So let's say that you travel through this whole parallel. Okay, so the parallel is this circle or ellipse with points with the same latitude of 30 degrees. So if you travel through the whole parallel, what distance would you travel? Well, the answer is going to be you're going to actually travel the same distance that you would travel at the equator, multiplied by cosine of the latitude. And that's going to give you 24,901 miles multiplied by the cosine of the latitude. And that's going to be the distance that you would travel if you go through this whole parallel. Now we want only 10 miles. So the result is going to be that multiplied by that, divided by that. And that will give you the tolerance for the longitude. Okay. Now let's pick up an example. So let's go to London. So these are the coordinates of London. So if we do the maths, the tolerance for the latitude is going to be 0.14 degrees, and the tolerance for the longitude is going to be 0.23 degrees. Okay, so the latitude of London is 51.51, so we're looking at a range of 51.51 plus minus 0.14. That will give you that range. And now regarding the longitude, we're going to look at that number plus minus that tolerance, and that will give us this range. So when we're looking for locations using a query, then inside our query, we're going to be looking for a departure latitude, for instance, between these two numbers, and a departure longitude between these two numbers. Let's pick up another example. Sydney. That's the latitude and that's the longitude. If you do the maths, you're going to get, again, 0.14 degrees for the latitude tolerance and 0.17 for the longitude tolerance. So if you do that number plus minus that tolerance, it gives you that range. If you do that number plus minus that tolerance, it will give you that range. All right. Now let's pick up another example, but this time a strange example. Okay, so this is a location somewhere. Okay, I don't know the name of the location. So the latitude is going to be 68.61, and the longitude this time is going to be very close to 180. So when you do the maths, you will end up with a range for the latitude, which is okay, but you're going to end up with a range for the longitude, which is not okay, because you're going to end up outside 180. So how do we fix this? Well, anything beyond 180, okay, and under 180.31 is the equivalent of anything between minus 180 and minus 179.69. So how do we get these numbers? Well, if you do 180 minus 360, then you still get the same longitude, because you have just traveled through one whole circle, okay, or one whole parallel. If you do the same thing there, 180.31 minus 360, you will still get the same longitude. Okay, to be more precise, or let's make it a little bit clear, if you travel from that point, okay, and you do a whole circle, then you're going to end up in the same points. So 0 is the equivalent of minus 360. If you travel from 60, okay, and you do one whole round and you come back to the same points, then you're going to get 360 plus 360, that's going to be 420. So 420 is the equivalent of 60, all right? And the same thing applies if you travel west instead of east, okay? So if you go from there and you travel west, that means that you're going to be doing minus 360. So 60 minus 360, that will give you minus 300. So 60 is the equivalent of minus 300. All right. So we're going to end up with two intervals. So when we run our query, we're going to look for departure longitudes between these two numbers or departure longitudes between these two numbers. Okay. Now let's look at an extreme case for the latitude this time. So we're going to pick up a point with a latitude which is very close to 90. So when we do our maths, we end up with a longitude which is within the right range, but we're going to end up with a latitude between these two numbers, and we're going to go beyond 90. So this interval is the equivalent of that one. Sorry. So what does it mean? Well, let's go back to our figure. So if you start from this point and you travel for 0.05 to get to a latitude of 90.05, so let's say that this is 90.05. It's not exactly that, but it's just for clarity. So 90.05 will be right there. So you traveled 0.05 degrees. All points on that parallel, they have the same latitude. So that one actually has got 90.05. And that one as well should have 90.05. But it also has got 90 minus 0.05. All right. So anything between 90 and 90.05 is the same as anything between that point, which is 90 minus 0.05, and 90. So the interval 90 to 90.005 is the same as the interval between 89.95 and 90. Okay. So this is going to be the same as this. Okay. Because if we go from 89.95 to 90, it's still within that interval. Okay. So instead of saying between that and that, we're just going to say it's going to be between that and the maximum, which is 90. All right. So hopefully this is clear. Now let's see how we're going to build our query. So let's pick up an example. So this is our departure. These are the latitude and longitude of the departure. And this is our destination. I picked up Sydney. So that's the latitude and that's the longitude. So let's do the maths. So the range for the latitude is going to be that one. That's the min and that's the max. Regarding the longitude, we're having a longitude out of range. So we end up with two intervals. Okay. So when we look at the departure in the query, we're going to say departure latitude between that and that, and departure longitude either greater than that or smaller than that. Okay. Now when we go to the destination, everything is within the right range. So the latitude is going to be between this and this, and the longitude is going to be between that and that. And that's our query. Okay. So make sure that you understand this properly before moving to the next video, where we're going to write code and build our query.